Margo would love to have you introduce yourself and your project.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see everybody again, and thank you for inviting me. Margo Rukashaza, I graduated in December 22. Feels like a long time ago, but it's been good. It's a very good cohort and good program. I work for PACCAR, which is truck manufacturing, engineering, finance, uh, uh, we have property, we have, so it's a mix of a lot of companies, which will kind of show in my project. I have a 17-year-old who's also doing running starts, so he has 2 years under his belt already. He's looking for universities. He's been accepted, but he wants to go to UW. Sorry, not Seattle U. He wants to do AI and engineering. His parents are engineers, so I don't know. It came with the territory, I guess. And I love to, one of my hobbies or maybe calling is to help young people, mentor, help people. I come from a country that was torn by war, so I have a passion for helping people who have had problems or who never saw love or who went through issues. So that's my passion and that's what I do. So I have a lot of children who call me, or young adults who call me mom or auntie. So that's my passion besides what I do for work. um, I love what I do, and I want to echo again the fact that we're the connectors between the lawyers and operations. Also, my background, I'm a master black belt in Six Sigma, so I've done a lot of continuous improvement projects, which means I've seen operations in all areas: HR, finance, engineering, manufacturing, suppliers, everybody. I've been working for almost 30 years now, so I have a lot of years under my belt. But also, I have a master's in organizational change and leadership, which helps with seeing things from a higher level, a big picture, which I'm discovering a lot of people do their silo work and they don't look at overarching. Or we manufacture trucks. People look at the engine, look at the powertrain, look at this and that, and nobody is really up there looking at how everything ties together. And when I say everything, there's different layers. It's not just program management. It's also purchasing. It's also human resources. It's also compliance, of course. That's my main thing. It's also social piece of it. So yes, these classes or this program has really, really tied all my skills and my values together. And we'll talk more about that. So that's who I am. We can go to. So my project, my capstone was on environmental social governance. This is now a buzzword, ESG, that some people really hate, some people love. It's interesting because in my organizational change leadership, my project, my capstone was on how a conservative company can attract and retain millennials. So I'm very much into generational differences or the values of different generations. So when I say some people love it, I find that the starting with the millennials and the Gen Z and Alpha now, they really are conscious about the environment, the social, they want to do what's right for the environment and for the world. And some of us from other generations, we're like, we can do things the way we used to do it, or yes, I understand it's needed, but it's hard to transition. So change is a difficult thing, and as a change agent in Six Sigma, I know that change is difficult. So it's been interesting, and this project was about environmental, so how a company, or it's now an obligation in Europe, and also now a lot in the US where we're adopting it, where companies need to prove that they're doing things that are right for the environment, that emissions, for example, that the social, we're making sure that we're not supporting people who are doing the wrong thing socially. And then the governance kind of ties it together. How does the company actually manage that? How do you make sure that your policies, your procedures, and everything you do tie all that together. So that's what ESG is all about. So it's pretty much a holistic way of sustainability, not just environmental, but other issues. And it's a framework that helps understand how an organization is managing risks and opportunities related to environmental, social, and governance criteria. And this is being included in financial reports. It's being included in, the investors are asking for this to decide who they invest in. And so it's an interesting project, and I'll talk about how I got to this one. So next slide, please. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the process itself, and then I'll explain on a higher level what that meant for me. So the report of the sustainability report is published by a company, an organization about environmental social governance impacts. It enables the company to be more transparent. So that's something that younger generations are asking for, transparency about the risks and opportunities they face. It's a communication tool. And in order for companies to identify and manage their impact on those issues, they need to identify and define their factors depending on the company, right? So not every company has the same factors. And that's why I brought up the fact that PACCAR has finances, which is more like, a financial company impacts are different than a manufacturing impact. So you have to kind of tie all those industries, and there are standards out there that decide what important factors are for each industry. And as a company, that has multiple industries, it was really interesting trying to figure out how everything tied together for us, just for us. So the overall deliverable of my project was a list of factors and related questions we ask ourselves to assess how we're doing. In my project, I focused on human rights. As you can imagine, it becomes really big. So human rights was my focus on the social side. And I'm also part of a lot of inclusion and equity, diversity councils and things like that. So I tried to tie all that together. So I focused on human rights, and I'm showing one of the topics on here. So if you could click, I don't know. So the human rights are part of the social dimension of ESG, and you click again. Sorry, disclosure topics or themes are identified to match the company's mission and different values chain levels. So here I picked working conditions. I'm showing here, so you can think of, we have operations, um, we have human resources, we have a lot of dimensions. It becomes really, really long very fast. And then if you click again, uh, oh, I guess I went too far. So for this company, we look at the working conditions in the supply chain, operations or occupational health and safety, labor practices, and human rights. These are part of the criterion defined to ensure we report on all aspects of the topic. We don't want to miss anything and then have the outside assessors come and say, oh, why did you not do this? And then finally, we have the factors that we report in. So it's a big, big topic that we had to kind of bring down and cut it into pieces that are biteable, that we can ask ourselves, how are we doing on this? Do we have evidence of it? So it's some sort of an audit. We're looking for audit questions. So yes, so if you would like to, if you could next slide, yes. So let's go to the big picture of this. So the inspiration to this, I kind of talked a little bit about it. I talked about the organizational change leadership, that the generational values were very important to me. And like I said, I work with a lot of young people. So that kind of gives me an idea of how they think and what's important to them. And the study made me admire millennials and their values and drive for an open world. They have a drive for open world, social, etc. So that was in the back of my mind. And then when I saw the ESG topics that we were being asked about, because in engineering compliance, I was doing emissions compliance, working on projects and emissions. So that kind of tied everything together. And then the financial reports that were bringing in all the ESG topics. So all that was in the background when we had the class that I loved, the sustainability class that Frank taught. And that kind of brought everything together. And I said, okay, you know what? I could probably do something about this, because it was tying social, environmental, and organizational compliance. And that's what triggered. That was my inspiration for the project. So if you could go to the next slide. So um, the topic itself, I think I've told a lot about it already. So it really brought curiosity and reflection, because we had that first class to give you, or that's Frank. It says these are how you find your topic, and this is how it needs to be reflective. It needs to pique your curiosity, etc. So I was like, you know what, this seems really, really big, but I'm gonna try and figure out how to bite into it. Uh, Thankfully, as destiny makes it, I guess, I met the director of ESG we had just hired at the company, and we clicked, and I asked a lot of questions. So it really piqued my curiosity and uh, tied into what I was thinking about doing. And again, I talked about my background in education and also socially. So it was a way to connect what I learned intellectually with my social, and also, of course, feeling like I can actually contribute and do something about it. So that was my interest. And then, of course, the support from the professors, from the stakeholder, the person who supported me on this, the director of ESG was the one who eventually, or sustainability was the one who became my stakeholder. The professionals, the lawyers I work with. I'm in the legal department, so the lawyers I work with were very helpful. The people who are doing environmental at different plants were very helpful, and the family, because, like I said, all the younger generations, I would go and throw things at them and say, how does this work? How is this important to you? Why do you think we should be doing this? So these are discussions we had around the house as well. And then the actualization, which is probably what a lot of people who are doing capstones think about. How do I get this thing done? I had an outline. I'm always an outline person. So give me the frame, give me the skeleton, and then I'll fill in the rest. But the skeleton tells me where am I going? And I usually start from the back. What do I want to get out of this? What is my deliverable? And then once I know what my deliverable is, I say, okay, how am I gonna, what are the steps to get there? And yeah, so that's what I did. And I was checking a lot. I think the plan the class has, or the capstone has, of you need to check in at this time throughout is very good, because some of us can wait until the last minute, or some of us don't think about it well enough. So that's how I did my project. So that's what I have. Any questions or comments?
Margo, if I may ask a question initially here, and I was so glad in your project that the connection that you had with your stakeholder. For those of attendees that may not be familiar with the role of the stakeholder, could you talk a little bit about that? What did you how did you pick a stakeholder, and what ultimately was that role that the stakeholder had with your project?
Yes, I was very lucky. I was very lucky. I had a very good stakeholder. As I said, I met the director of sustainability, and it was a topic that was very new in the company, and it hit right on time. The role of the stakeholder is to guide you, really hold your. They're not going to do the project for you, but when you have a question, you go ask them, and they guide you in the right direction, and they're an expert. Mine was an expert in the area. He had worked in different industries doing that role. So he was new to the company. So what I brought to our team, if I may say that, is that I have the company history, and he was coming from outside, and I was as somebody said, I'm sorry, Anne, I think, that we become the interpreter or the communicator. I think Kelly said that we become the connector and the communicator. Where so I became the communicator of what would fit in the culture and how to put it into the culture, and he became more of the expert in the subject. And he was my go-to when I'm stuck. When I'm stuck, and they say, okay, and biting it down. Actually, that he helped me a lot, and you, Frank, to scope creep and bring it down to a biteable project for the months we have. And yeah, I don't know if I answered the question, but finding it, it's hard to find a sponsor. It's really hard. But I always say this, and this might be helpful because I say this to people I mentor, is I went to a conference in Seattle, and they were saying you need 3 different people or 4 different people in your world. You need a mentor who's going to tell you when you're doing something wrong, who's not afraid to tell you what you're doing wrong professionally. You need a sponsor who is in the company, who's going to speak on your behalf when you need to move up. And then you need an HR person, to find you another job or to know what your skills are. And then as women, women in the profession, we need a psychologist, a therapist to say, okay, I'm home, I'm doing my wifely things, I'm at work, I'm a professional. How do I tie all that together? So I'm sorry, this came out of nowhere, but so I think the sponsor became more of my mentor and sponsor. I call him sponsor because of that, but my stakeholder became my sponsor and mentor at the same time.
Okay.
Long answer. Sorry.
Very helpful. Thank you.
I just want to add to that, Margo. I believe in that therapist part. I actually have an executive coach that sort of functions as a work therapist, I think, that sits outside of my company, but I'm able to actually work through problems with her and how you present this to an executive without it being necessarily buried within the organization. So I recommend that. I highly recommend that to anyone who's who's working on that angle of things.
I agree. Thank you.
Margo, amazing project. Just general follow-up question. How do you navigate, like you mentioned, obviously ESG is, much more tip of the tongue in Europe and required. What would be a recommendation when you think, as an organization, this is not here yet? Like, do you start to kind of build up that compliance posture in the US and go, okay, this is going to start to come? Or is it, how did you kind of work through that? Are you just Europe focused on, like, let's make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's there, or, holistically start to adopt it so you can prepare for, the next era?
Very interesting question, because I'm working on my next role is to be the global compliance person for the company. So with that, I've been asked, thank you. I've been asked to consult in different areas, data privacy, for example, or cybersecurity, or data management, things like that, which are compliance things that we have to adhere to. And Europe has a lot of that already that's implemented. In fact, ESG reporting is a requirement now in Europe. So what I'm doing is, using my connections or communication skills, is to say, hey, we're doing a global global compliance. It doesn't make sense for us to design something for Europe and then have to redesign it for the US. And we are, some would say not lucky, but we see that California goes towards European standards with emissions, with all data privacy and all that. So it's easy for us to make an argument that it's coming to the US. Look at what California is doing. Look at what Maine is doing. Look at what these other states, which for us, having 50 states, it just keeps adding on. One is adapting on, the other is adapting, maybe with a little tweak or difference, but generally what's happening in Europe is coming here. So in some cases, we can win the case because the investment is not that big, or they realize that if we do it twice or three times, it's going to be more expensive. But we're very successful, and they're getting, the leadership is realizing that we probably should do it right the first time instead of having to patch once it happens in the US. So it's an interesting challenge that I have coming, but I have a framework designed for the whole global piece and not just one area. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
These are some amazing questions. And I'm like, my wheels are turning around. We hear about how the job market, generally, not just in compliance, but like the job market, um, m might be shrinking because of AI and things are moving away from needing humans. And I'm thinking, but compliance, like all of these things need compliance professionals, right? And maybe the job title is not named compliance or risk management or something, I'm not sure, but like all I'm hearing is that the growth in this space is huge, right? Like if we have all of these regulations and increased administrative oversight, and whether it's in the US or globally, the opportunity for growth and expansion in this space is enormous. So
Yeah, I think because just like over the years, we've seen, mechanics are needed, but it's not as big. Or in manufacturing, especially with the robots, people were afraid. Yes, a lot of people went out of jobs, unfortunately, but it's a change of skill sets that are needed, I think. So compliance is one of them I see growing a lot, especially in our industry, because we have electrification of vehicles, we have autonomous vehicles, we have
right.
all that has to come with regulations, or is coming with regulations. So the compliance realm is really growing a lot.
Well, and even just in your to your Capstone project, the increase in desire for different metrics, right? Metrics around environmental metrics, or um, just things that we didn't use to measure that companies should be doing or people want them to be doing. Um, if all of those things need some sort of audit or some sort of measurement, and that's all compliance. So yeah.
Yeah, right now we're being asked if our products have chemicals, this chemical or that
Right.
chemical, or did it come from Cuba, or did it come from Russia? It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's really, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
And one of the things I liked about your project too, Margo, was the research that you had done dealing with the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, and how you were able to apply those metrics and really try to consider what type of global benchmarks that could be used. So I thought that that was an important part of your project too.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, and I would be remiss if I didn't give a nod to the social justice mission at Seattle U, right? Like all of this is very much connected, or can be connected to, as we see organizations really try and hone in on lifting marginalized communities, right? Having, we were talking earlier about vendor, third-party assessments or audits, right? Wanting to make sure that we're tracking who are our vendors. Are they minority-owned vendors? Are we lifting up people in the community? Are all of those things, right? But we have to measure that. And how do we measure that? How do we meet our goals? Awesome job.
Margo,
Thanks.
I didn't get to, this is John Lewis. I didn't get to see your final product, but I saw it in some of the early stages, and I thought it was a good tool. Many companies they're not addressing this right now. And I saw it as a good tool for them to start looking at, okay, what are we doing? How can we improve the metrics that we're looking at, or look at different metrics to start tracking ourselves? So it was an educational tool for the existing leadership or I saw it developing that way. Is that how you've used it at PACCAR?
Yes, very much. And as I said, we were just starting. We had just hired the director of sustainability, so it was very new for our company. And our company is an old company that's pretty conservative, and
Right.
they're very good financially. And yes, it's become totally education. It's been, and that with that, talking about what the skills we need, patience is a big thing, and attacking things from different angles, because it's always been in US, it's always been financial gain. How are we doing
Mhm.
financial reports? And that's why I bring in all of this is being included in our financial reports. It used to be just financial, and now you have to include these things for investors and customers to want to buy your product. So it's
Did
become very interesting. Yeah.
did your guide help in that translation as well, describing ways to show it from a financial perspective? Because aspirationally, yeah, that people can get on board with workers' rights and working conditions and things like that, but the finance team is going to want to know, how does that translate to the bottom line, or how does that affect EBITDA, or whatever. So were you
Yes.
able to give some guidance in that?
Yes. So it's a work in progress, but
Mhm.
we have one of the things, the biggest sell for the project, or when I was working on it, and for the ESG team, is the investors don't want to invest in somebody who doesn't have these things, who doesn't show, who's not transparent in what they're doing. Our company does a lot of it, but we're very quiet about it. So there are some things where you have to be transparent and communicate. So when you bring in, of course, investors are asking for this, that's a financial piece, right?
Sure.
And then there is, as we show that, we always said this in continuous improvement, that you're not it's cost avoidance. You're if you do it right the first time, you're saving a lot more than if you come back to fix something. So
Right.
that's how we're selling this. Of course, there's the fines. If you don't get this done, you're going to have fines. So there are different angles we go by to show the financial gain. Is it making money immediately? No, but in long term, if you're thinking long term, you need to get on the program. You need to get this done, because it will hit your bottom line eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But we are showing already, that we're seeing Boeing, we're seeing um, uh, Volvo just got fines because of non-compliance. So we're seeing a lot of things happening, and we're hoping we're ahead of it. And that's how I sold my program in my new position, is we need to get ahead of this. We don't want to be in the newspaper being the ones who were not compliant. Did that answer
Thanks.
your question?
It did. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margo. Thanks for being here. I know you're taking time away from your conference, so I appreciate it so much.